For over 50 years, Burlington's legacy has been great deals on coats for all weather conditions. So before you're caught unprepared for the winter weather, head to Burlington for name brands, quality items, and surprising fits for every family member. Stock up on coats, sweaters, and accessories before the cold hits, so you can finally stop avoiding the elements and start living comfortably. Warm up at your nearest Burlington location less than 1 mile away. Burlington. Deals, brands, wow.
This year, Santa's bringing the power of Energizer into his workshop.
Whoa, the Energizer Bunny's got so much power.
Wait, he's powered up all the toys. I think that means we're done for the year.
I love this bunny.
He's the hardest working helper the North Pole has ever seen. And he wants all your gifts to have the power of the #1 longest lasting AA battery. So this holiday season, stock up on Santa's and the elves' favorite battery, Energizer Ultimate Lithium.
With Uber Reserve, you can book your Uber ride in advance, 90 days in advance. Perfect for all you forward thinkers and planning gurus. Reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. Uber Reserve. See Uber app for details.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and to your 1865 match report. We're recording this the day after Nottingham Forest went down 3-0 away at Manchester City, and although the scoreline was the same as the Arsenal match recently, I think it's fair to say that this match had a slightly different feel to it. In just a few minutes, we'll be discussing the tactics, the match, and of course, what that means for Forest before the weekend's game against Man United. Adam, you were there. You were also behind enemy lines. And before we start talking about the actual game itself, look, we know what the scoreline was. Just tell me, what were your feelings as you left the ground and your slept on it feelings this morning?
Yeah, I think, look, it was certainly an experience being behind enemy lines. I'll tell you that for free. It's not one that I would openly recommend. I feel like if Chris Wood had slotted his chance away, it might have been a different story. But look, I think the game itself, it was similar to Arsenal in the sense that the similarity being that we gave them too much respect. I understand the team you're playing. I understand that we went away to Arsenal and Man City probably expecting nothing, right? And I think that would be fair to say for most Forest fans. It's not losing the game, it's the manner in which you lose. I think in this game we created more chances, for sure, and we looked like we could score, which we didn't against Arsenal, so there is that sort of difference. But unfortunately, and you know, I've said this quite a few times, I still think Man City are the best team in the world. They've gone for a bad spot. They are still the best team in world football, in my money. So this was always going to be a tough game, but the goals you conceded, you gave them those chances, you gave them those openings, and you were punished for it. And not taking your own chances, you were punished for that as well. In these sort of games, so it comes down to those fine moments, and those five moments we got wrong.
Yeah. And just before we go into some of those moments, just a recap of the team news. So Forest did make some changes. We expected there'd be changes with 3 games in 7 days. So we had Sells in goal, we had Aina and Moreno in the fullback positions, and Milenkovic and Murillo at centre-back. Defensive midfield was Yates with Dominguez, with Jota and Dalanga on the wings, and Gibbs-White supporting Chris Wood. So 3 changes to the starting lineup. And that thing that you mentioned there, Adam, about Forest giving too much respect, I think it's one of those things whereby I was hoping that, for example, by having Dominguez back in there, by having Gibbs-White, you know, doing his thing of being able to be a number 10, but also the fact that he hustles back would mean that we would actually have a chance of winning the midfield battle. But Pep played his own tactical hand by not so much the personnel, but the way in which he played them. So he effectively played with a back 4. He had Gundogan sitting slightly deeper as a 6/8, but then he had essentially 2 number 10s and 2 wingers playing behind Erling Haaland. And I don't think Forest were expecting that. And it meant that we did get overrun in those defensive midfield positions, didn't it?
Yeah, I think we got overrun in midfield in general. I think it was just we couldn't keep up with them. Look, I think that you talk about Man City, some of the players that you talked about that were in that system. So obviously De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Jack Grealish, you know, and Jeremy Doku on the wing. these are players that are, world-class footballers. And I think for me, I didn't love the team selection, if I'm being honest. I think that Dominguez has a lot of abilities, but he can get out very easily overrun. And I think that he was chasing shadows, as was Ryan Yates all game. Now, there's no shame to chasing the shadow of one of the best midfielders to ever play in the Premier League, in Kevin De Bruyne. But when you can't get close to them, and when they've got 3-4 yards every single time they get the ball, you are going to get punished, and it's going to be an issue. I think when we're talking about defensively, sometimes people look at defensively as you need to have 2 sitting sixes in there against the big teams, or you're going to get battered. I don't agree with that anyway, but I think in this instance, you needed someone on the ball that is good on the ball. Dominguez is okay on the ball. Ryan Yates is not his strong point. I think it's a game that was crying out for Elliot Anderson from the start. And I think we're gone are the days where we play 2 sixes. We need a 6 and an 8. And I think that Elliot Anderson is that perfect 8. I think he needed to start, and I think it would have made a bit of a difference, to be honest.
Yeah. Just going into some of the events of the match, though, the first chance fell to City, and it was Erling Haaland. He saw his first-time shot from De Bruyne's pass saved by Sells, and then there was a moment when essentially this set the tone, really. There was a move forward from Nathan Ake, and it meant that Gundogan was able to break from midfield. I've got to be honest, Morgan Gibbs-White, he wasn't on the ball. He didn't track his man. Gundogan crossed it over. De Bruyne was coming in from the right-hand side, headed it back across goal. And then it meant that Bernardo Silva was able to prod home from close range with the Forest defence at 6s and 7s. And to me, that was symptomatic of what happened, because we just gave them that little bit too much space. We were too passive. In this case, you could point the finger at Morgan, but it's a team thing. When Forest have defended well, it's because they've defended well from the front. And when you're not doing that, that's when you're vulnerable, especially to teams like Man City.
It was a really poor goal to concede. I think that, my instant reaction when it went in was like looking up at the big screens and saying, like, surely he's offside. Because if he's not offside, there's no way he would have that much space a couple of yards out. And then you look at the replay and he wasn't offside. He just had that much space. And it was really disappointing to concede. I mean, I'll give the Haaland chance you mentioned. It's a really good save by Matt Sells, who I don't know if he did anything wrong on the night, to be honest. I mean, he could do an awful lot about any of the goals, but first goal was really disappointing to concede. I mean, we are statistically the second best defence in the Premier League this season. You can't be the second best defence and concede goals like that. So I think anyone that gives us a pass because it's Man City, I don't think you can, based on how good this defence has been this season. So yeah, really, really disappointing.
Well, I mean, there's worse to come if you hold on a bit. I think one of the things that's worth pointing out, I mean, we did say it at the start, Forest did create chances, and at 1-0 down, Jota, who started on the left and then moved over to the right and sort to the Langa, he basically picked Josko Gvardiol's pocket. He looked up, he played it across to Gibbs-White, who was on the edge of the box. It was a decent effort, and Ortega put his right arm out and saved it. I have to say that watching on TV, as soon as Gibbs-White hit it, I thought it was in. So I bet you were really sitting on your hands at that point, Adam.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenging one. But no, it was a really smart save, to be fair. Like you say, that we did have those chances. I think Jota on the day, I can tell you this from the City perspective at the very least, absolutely rattled the City fans. With but this is what Jota is, and I think just to very quickly touch on Jota, he is an absolute Rottweiler, isn't he? Or a Jack Russell Terrier in his case, maybe, but he is very much a player that will bother opposing fans. He's very much a player that will bother players on the other team because he will nip at your heels and he will do whatever he can. He works so hard, he gives 110%, and he has got that bit of quality as well. This one was really unlucky. I think Morgan, probably being really reflective, thinks he would have done better with it, but he made the keeper make a save. And again, that's the way that we were going to get a City. Before the game, from the way all of us said, is that the way we get a City is on the counter attack. They are vulnerable, and they were vulnerable. For the whole game, they had those their fullbacks get forwarded, and Vardiel plays as a left back, left centre midfielder, left winger, all in one, and you can pick that space and you can have a go at them. And we did it quite a bit, but unfortunately just couldn't find the net this time.
And just for the record, I think that thing about Forest getting over on in midfield, because Guardiola was coming forward a lot, it basically meant that City were playing 3-6-1 against our two central midfielders, and that's why we're getting overrun. City had another couple of chances, so well, more than a couple actually. So Guardiola had two chances, and then also De Bruyne got through and hit it across a daisy cutter, which went the wrong side of the post as far as City were concerned. I think Sal's probably had it covered. And then De Bruyne, returning as City captain, he's obviously had a really rough time with injuries. We know that the way that footballers' careers go these days, City aren't going to be able to get much out of him every week, but in this match he was at the centre of pretty much everything while he was on the pitch, including gifting us a chance which saw Chris Wood skip on through and pull the trigger. Ortega had spread himself really well, and it's one of those where if you're City, you're saying the keeper's done a good job, as Chris Wood himself will be saying, I wish I'd probably gone round him, because you watch it back and you realise Ortega committed himself quite early, and Woody had the space to do that.
I think he's got to score. I think he's got to do better at the very least. I think he was caught in two minds. I think that's what the finish was. Like you say, it would have been better to go around the goalkeeper, or even as a striker to go across the goalkeeper if you finish rather than going to the near post. But when you're playing Man City away, that's got to go in. I think if you want a result there, you've got to score your big chances, and that was a massive chance that we missed.
And of course, it's one of those, isn't it? Is that you got your striker in form. Against City, you're only going to get limited chances. Yeah, a player like Chris Wood, he's an honest guy as far as strikers go. He'll be his own worst critic on that one. And it made such a difference because less than 2 minutes later, Forest once again gave City way too much space in the box. This time it was slightly different. So the ball was on the left-hand side once again. But as Doku cut inside in the challenge, his hand inadvertently went in the face of Ryan Yates. Yatesy went down. And then that meant that Nico Dominguez was caught in between two players. Did he go to the ball and try and get Doku, or did he try and keep marking De Bruyne? In the end, he didn't quite manage either. And that meant that when the pass went through to De Bruyne, he looked up and suddenly realised he had the freedom of the area and hit the kind of finish you'd expect him to, back across the goalkeeper. No chance for Sal's, and it was 2-0.
I think Kevin De Bruyne is the best player in the Premier League. You absolutely cannot give him that. You can't give him 1 yard, never mind the 3 or 4 that he had in the box, completely free as a bird, just slam it into the top corner. Look, it's a great finish. It's what you expect from Kevin De Bruyne. Look, I think Forest will feel hard done by, because how many times do you see them given week in, week out, where, because what Doku didn't do on purpose, absolutely not. There's no suggestion that was done on purpose. It wasn't. But accidental or not, it took Yates out of the game. In that scenario, it took one of your sixers out of the game. I think the referee has to pull it back for a foul. I think it would have been very soft. And I get that from the City perspective, when he's just put his arm up to sort of balance himself, whatever. If you catch an opposing player like that, you've got to pull it back. And since he's hit him in the face, is it not classified, quote unquote, as a head injury? Shouldn't the play be stopped anyway, even if it's not a foul? That'd be kind of my only thing. We haven't done well enough with the goal, but I think there is an argument to be made that the goal probably shouldn't have stood anyway, because the game shouldn't have carried on.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, isn't it, whereby if you're the team who's on the receiving end of that decision, then you would say, well, you could argue the case. And if you're the team that benefit from that, the one thing I will say is that on the whole, Michael Oliver as a ref was very consistent. He wasn't trying to stop things too easily. And I thought he had, on the whole, a pretty decent match, apart from one thing, which I'm going to come on to in the second half. You're looking really surprised there, Adam.
I think he had a fine match. I don't mind when referees let a game flow. I don't mind that at all. But I think he just missed a lot. just loads of those little decision stuff that he got wrong. I think if I was looking at this from a City perspective, I would have been a lot more annoyed that a lot of Forest players went unbooked in the first half, and they were fairly fortunate. I don't know. I felt like he had a very typical Michael Oliver match where he wanted to make himself the main event. I just think that's the type of referee he is. And that's not me slandering him. I just think that's what he is.
Well, we've discussed main character syndrome in officials many, many times, and that's not a debate that's going to go away anytime soon. Just before we come to the break, I think we should point out as well that there were a couple of half chances for Forest before the half ended. So Jota again on the right wing, he put the ball across. It looked as if it was a pass to Wood, but you could tell that he was actually going for the far corner of the box with Elanga, who took a Callum Hudson-Odoi shot. And just like about 2/3 of Callum Hudson-Odoi's shots, it went just wide of the far post. And then Moreno got in towards the very end of the half, had a right-footed effort, which was blocked by, I think it was actually by Grealish, which says something again about how City's midfield was playing. And City were able to scramble it clear from throw-in, and that meant that it was 2-0 at half-time.
The 1865 Match Report.
Hi, it's Rich here, and thanks, as always, for listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. You may have heard that Billy Davies is going to be doing a gig. Yes, he is coming to the Albert Hall in Nottingham in February to talk about his time at Nottingham Forest, and he will be joined by a few familiar faces such as Wes Morgan, Lee Camp and Terry the Kitman. Well, I just want to let you know that we are soon going to have an exclusive giveaway and more details relating to this event. So keep tuned in to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. We'll be telling you more very soon.
Grab an ice-cold can of Celsius Sparkling Kiwi Guava and experience a delicious taste of essential energy. Celsius powers active lives every day with refreshing, fruit-forward flavors and proven ingredients. Find Celsius Essential Energy drinks at a retailer near you or visit Celsius.com to learn more.
You're listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast.
Welcome back to the 1865 Match Report, and for the second half there was a substitution on each team. Manuel Kanji was taken off for Man City with Kyle Walker coming on. There was some suggestion on the TV that it was like, was it an injury or was it that Elanga was giving him the runaround? I mean, I take your pick on that one. But more importantly, Forest took off Ryan Yates and put on Morato. And by going three at the back, or three central defenders rather, they were trying to counter that midfield overrun. Was it an expected substitution as far as you're concerned, Adam?
No, I think that we probably assumed that something would happen at half time. I didn't think bringing Morato on was what he would do. I kind of got the principle of it, and I think that the only reason we haven't played with a back three more is because Murillo and Milinkovic have been a really good partnership. I think Morato probably feel a little bit hard done by because whenever he comes on, he plays really well. So, but I think it was. I also think that substitution was partly to get the wing backs involved a little bit more as well, give City something extra to think about. But as a spoiler alert for the second half, obviously everyone knows this, it didn't overly work. I think that City probably overran us a little bit less in the second half, but I think that was also partly because they were 2-0 up anyway. We had a bit more of the ball in the second half.
Yeah.
They let us have a bit more. City
or at least for the first half of the second half.
Yeah, and they're not a pressing team anyway. They're not a team that's going to press you. They'll let you have the ball in areas where it doesn't affect them, and as soon as it affects them, they come out and meet you. That's the way that they've always played.
Yeah. Let's go back to the actual action then. So I think the first chance of any note really was Murillo. He had a chance to advance from 30-odd yards out, and he let fly from 25. It was one of his specials, and unfortunately, like most of his specials, it didn't quite go in. It would have been obviously a wonderful moment if it had gone in. Would it have affected the result? Well, of course, the main thing, as with the Wood chance in the first half, is that City, having been on a bad run, it may have made them jittery. And then two things happened within another space of a few minutes again. So the first thing, and I made a note of this because it struck me at the time, is that There's a moment when Forest were about to try and break from the edge of their own box and go on a counter, and Gundogan did one of those professional fouls. He pulled back Morgan Gibbs-White, had hold of his shirt literally for about 5 seconds, and because the ref was waiting to see if Morgan was going to get away, Morgan lost his rag and he just gently tapped Gundogan back. He retaliated, sure. Gundogan made the most of it and went down like he'd taken like a knee in the small of his back, as if he was completely poleaxed. And the referee bought it, which meant that Gundogan deservedly got a yellow card for the foul, but Morgan got the yellow card for retaliating as well. And I think what that did is it meant that the momentum that Forest were hoping to build there was not only taken away by the foul, but also it meant that City regrouped. They were having a go at Morgan for retaliating and trying to make out as a big thing. They were doing the kind of stuff that you'd expect a team like City to do. And then 2 minutes later, that's when Forest got hit on the break themselves, with Haaland passing through for Doku. And unfortunately, I have to say this, so Milenkovic had obviously moved to the right side of a back three. I don't like him being there. He's the guy you want in the middle of a back three, but of course with two left footers in Murillo and Morato, and he looked a bit like, well, prime Joe Worrell when he gets caught in those situations. He didn't quite know what to do, and Doku was able to turn him inside out and fire into the far corner, scoring what was frankly a Callum Hudson-Odoi goal.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jeremy Doku is a fantastic dribbler. You know, that's always been, since City bought him, that's been his biggest attribute. He absolutely turned Moreno inside and out for a lot of the game. And there's no disrespect. That's not me saying anything against Moreno. It's actually more me complimenting Doku that he's that sort of player. It's a great finish. There's just nothing else you could say. As soon as he cuts in, you knew it was a goal. You know, you can play the goal music as soon as he cuts in, you know, because I think Milenkovic, you can say obviously what we want about him. He shouldn't be on the right side. He should be in the middle. He shouldn't be stood up against a winger. I don't think any centre-half really should be stood up against a winger. I think obviously Murillo is a bit of a freak of nature in the sense that he's a lot more athletic. He's a lot more of he's a lot faster. He's a lot more agile. He can maybe be stood up against a winger. It's never an ideal scenario though, is it really? And if that was Aina against Doku, maybe you fancy Aina sort of stands him up a bit better, has that more of a yard of pace, but there's not too much we can do with this one. There's no point over analysing this goal. Good pass by Haaland.
Symptom of Forest trying to get back in the game. It's a classic thing, isn't it? You know, we got caught on the break. There was a round of substitutions, and what that meant was that we saw Eric Da Silva Moreira come on. I was expecting maybe Nico Williams, but then on the other hand, what's the point in bringing on Nico Williams? You're 3-0 down. Let's get Moreira on, see what he can do. Also, we saw Taiwo Awoniyi, Elliot Anderson come on, and it meant that we saw Gibbs-White go off and the captain's armband pass to Murillo, which in the grand scheme of things probably isn't that big a thing, but I think there's a lot of Forest fans who are quite pleased to see that.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice. I think bringing Silva Moreira on, like you say, probably was just because let's get him some Premier League minutes, because we don't know what we've got with him. He's very young. He's got a lot of ability. I think he did absolutely fine when he came on, by the way. I don't think, like there was one time when he broke down the right-hand side and had a bit of space. So I think he did okay when he came on. At 3-0, realistically, the game was over. Thing with Murillo, I think he goes one of two ways. Either he does stay at Forest and he becomes an absolute club icon and we're building a statue in 10 years, or he goes in the summer for 70, 80 million to one of the big Spanish clubs. I think that's kind of his trajectory at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fairness, we were saying that this time last year, even when he'd only played a few games. The other substitution saw Jota go off for Ramon Sosa, and it's one of those, again, if we had a chance of getting something out of the game, you'd imagine it would have been Hudson-Odoi rather than Sosa. But, that's the way it went. In terms of chances, the most notable chance went to City. Before he went off, De Bruyne had a shot from the edge of the area. It took, I think, a double deflection off Morato and Murillo, and Sells had to get down low late on to turn it round the post. Forest had a couple of half chances. One of them saw Anderson and Awoniyi combine before playing in Alanga, who tried to go for the top far corner, It was a poor shot, wasn't it? Oh, you're shaking your head there. Go on.
I was behind that one, obviously, in that end, and it's just I don't. I'm not going to vent about any particular Forest player after getting beat by the best team in the world, but I don't get Elanga. I don't. I think that what frustrates me the most is that he had 6 or 7 bad games in a row, and that got him dropped for Jota, which was the right decision. Hudson-Odoi has 1 bad game against Ipswich, and he gets dropped. I don't understand the difference. I know Elanga's fast, but Elanga is very quickly turning into a Adama Traore. I don't think any of us wanted that. A player that is really good at getting forward.
As long as he doesn't turn into Adama Diakabi.
Well, yeah, I mean, but no, his end product is just so lacking for me, and it's very frustrating. There is a player there, and there is raw talent there. He's still really young.
I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say I think the reason that Elanga was playing today and Hudson-Odoi wasn't is probably with that 3 games in a week issue going on. So I would expect to see Hudson-Odoi certainly starting at Old Trafford, and whether Elanga does or not, I don't know. He might play with both of them. But I do agree with you. And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out in recent games is that when Elanga's been on the pitch, because of that issue of creating end product, I've noticed he's been taking the set pieces, and that worked. That's how Murillo scored against Newcastle. Whether that's had the desired effect in terms of geeing up his game or not, jury's out on that one.
Well, I mean, if you're bothered about set pieces, just play Ward-Prowse, don't you? Like if that's what he was in the team for. I think obviously Hudson-Odoi not coming on, I think was probably an eye on Man United on Saturday. Yeah. I would imagine anyway. So I think it will be Hudson-Odoi that starts. I'd be frustrated if the team comes out at 4:30 on Saturday and it's Elanga and Hudson-Odoi. I think I would much rather it be Hudson-Odoi and Jota, just because I think Jota gives you more, he offers you more, and he does have more end product.
And I also think that, bearing in mind that United are now going to this 3 at the back with kind of 1 defensive wing back and 1 attacking wing back, we certainly want to be trying to exploiting the spaces in behind. So I think there's something to be said for that. Just before we preview that match in a bit more detail, the other chance that I want to just note is only a half chance really, but it's an Anderson dribble, the kind that we've seen before. Unfortunately, there's no real pace or power on the shot, so it meant that it was an easy-ish gather for Ortega in the City goal, albeit at the second attempt. I mean, I guess it's one where it's one to add to the stats.
Yeah, I mean, like we said at the start of this, we had more than we did against Arsenal. 100% we did. And the performance, I think, overall was probably better than the Arsenal performance, well, if not definitely better than the Arsenal performance, but that was quite a low bar. And I think we're setting quite a low bar to say it was better than Arsenal.
Okay, I understand why you're saying that. So just with Man United in mind, firstly, do you think that we'll stick with 4 at the back, or do you think we'll go with a 3? Bearing in mind what we just said about the way Man United are playing and the way that Forest might want to get a foothold in games.
I think the Man United game is going to tell a lot about the rest of the season, to be honest. And I think they'll go for a 4 just because Milenkovic and Murillo is a really good partnership. And I think, like you said, with the three at the back, especially because Milenkovic kind of has to play on the right side, I think that'd be quite dangerous against Man U. So I think they will probably stick with the 4. But what I mean by I think this will define the season is because I probably expect Forest to finish 11th, 12th, slip down to mid-table, and that'd be a really good season, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But if Forest see their, ambition is a bit different, and they think, well, we want to be in that top 8, 7 or 8, and try and get, European football of some aspect, you've probably got to go and get some at Man U. And dare I say, you maybe have to beat Man U because they're a team that you're competing with for those spots.
And I guess for both Man U and Forest, it's going to be that case of it's not the fact that you get knocked down sometimes, it's how you react. And with that in mind as well, do you see Man United as being a stronger prospect than they were 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely. They were a team that was deflated, and they had no togetherness. They clearly weren't playing for Ten Hag, who I felt bad for in the end, to be honest. But obviously, Ruben Amorim's come in. They were pretty poor against Ipswich. They battered Everton, who then battered Wolves, which is confusing, but that's the Premier League, I suppose. And then I watched the second half on my phone on the way home, and I think they did well against Arsenal. I think defensively they did well against Arsenal. Arsenal being set piece FC. I do love this comparison from Arsenal to Stoke. It does make me smile quite a bit for the set piece goals of the game. But other than that, I think Man U were okay. They're still figuring it out. It's a completely brand new system. I don't think they have the players to play Amorim's system. So I don't think for the rest of the season, I don't think they'll be fantastic. I think they'll sort of plod along. They might buy a few players that are plug and play into that system in January. I don't think it's a terrible time to play them. It would have been better before Amorim and when they still had Ten Hag. But this isn't a new manager bounce team. Because Amorim's system is so ingrained, it's so detailed and layered, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take the right personnel to play it. So they're still figuring things out. They are there for the taking. They are a team that we can beat.
Okay, those are positive words. So thank you very much, Adam. And just before we leave you, just to let you know about the position in the table. Obviously, Forest could have gone above City if they had managed to get the victory. But as it is, Forest are still in 6th position on 22 points. Just below them is Villa, and just below them is Spurs. So by the time you're listening to this, if Tottenham managed to win on Thursday night, then it's possible that Forest may have slipped down a position in the table. But in terms of that, there's 3 teams currently on 20 points. There's 2 teams on 19 points. So it is still tight. And it just shows as well, if you can get a result, it can change the field very, very quickly at this stage of the season. So once again, thank you very much to Adam, and thank you, listener, for joining us. As usual, you can find all of our links if you go to 1865.football. That's 1865 as a word, .football. And we will join you again at the weekend after the Man United match with our match report. Come on, you Reds.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Llegó la venta para amigos y familiares de JCPenney con un cupón de 30% extra para que ahorres esta Navidad. Además tenemos ropa elegante y ropa de invierno para la familia con hasta 40% de descuento y obtén hasta 50% en la venta del hogar. Aprovecha más ofertas y grandes ahorros para ti y tu familia. JCPenney. Vale la pena. Ofertas y cupón válido del 4 al 8 de diciembre en selección de estilos. Aplican algunas exclusiones. Detalles en la tienda jcp.com.